My CEO wife, Sophia, thought that those men who pursued her were only after her money. So, whenever I spent more than 100 yuan, I had to report it to her. Because I was deeply in love with her, I was willing to be the man who silently supported her behind the scenes of her career. However, that car accident changed everything. That day, Sophia actually rejected my application for a 3,000 yuan surgery. You know, 3,000 yuan is a month's living expenses for many people. Sophia even said at that time, "I don't earn money for you to suck on me like a leech." Due to the untimely surgery, my hand was left with a lifelong disability. After getting off the operating table, I saw a tweet from her first love who had just returned from abroad. In the photo was a watch worth 5 million yuan, with the caption, "A certain little girl is still willing to give me the best, just like when we were kids." And he specifically tagged Sophia. Instead of making a big fuss as I used to, I just calmly liked it and thought to myself, well, it's good. You too can just keep this way. James, what do you mean by your comment to David? Everyone was having a great time, but because of your words, he's been blaming himself until now. He just came back from abroad. What's wrong with me giving him a gift? We've been playing together since we were kids. Can you stop being jealous without any reason? Before she could say the word jealous, I interrupted, "Is that so? Then I'm sorry. It won't happen again." There was a sudden silence on the other end of the phone. Every time we quarreled because of David in the past, I would demand an explanation from Sophia. Although every quarrel ended unhappily, and although I was the one who was most heartbroken after each quarrel, I still couldn't help but want her to prove herself the next time. But this time, I didn't refute anything and calmly accepted Sophia's questioning. She didn't know that this car accident had made me re-evaluate our relationship. I hung up the phone before Sophia could answer. Just as I deleted that comment, Sophia's call came in. This time, her tone was much better, and she said, "I'm not blaming you, it's just... well, forget it. Where are you?" I replied indifferently, "I'm in the hospital." Sophia said anxiously, "Okay, you probably don't have money for a taxi. I'll come and pick you up." The corridor of the hospital was neither lit nor air-conditioned. In the snowy New Year's Eve, it was so cold that people were shivering. My red, frozen hands involuntarily clenched the phone, and I suddenly felt that all this was extremely ironic. At this time, David's voice came from the other end of the phone, "Sophia, is James still angry with me?" I didn't expect James to think too much. "I don't know what to do now. Can you stay with me?" I said coldly, "Sophia." She seemed to be stunned for a moment, and then said, "I'll send the driver to pick you up." Then she hung up the phone. Listening to the empty beep, beep sound on the other side, I closed my phone, lowered my head, and let out a long sigh. As expected, the one who was finally abandoned was still me, just like in the past. But for some reason, I couldn't shed a single tear, nor did I feel sad. I just felt a little sorry for myself. I stood at the hospital entrance. The cold wind blew up my only long down jacket, bringing a dense cold feeling. A taxi driver who was hurrying home stopped, rolled down the window, and asked, "Sir, do you want to go home? I can give you a free ride home for Christmas." I smiled gently and said, "Thank you. Someone's coming to pick me up." One taxi after another passed by, but Sophia's driver never came. Probably she had forgotten about me again. I didn't bomb her with calls like I used to, demanding that she come to pick me up immediately. Instead, I raised my hand and stopped a passing taxi. I knew I had no money on me, but I couldn't bring myself to make a big scene with her again. When the car reached the entrance of the community, suddenly, huge fireworks bloomed in the sky, and their brilliance occupied half of the night sky. I was stunned. The taxi driver smiled and explained, "I heard that Sophia's husband came back from abroad, and Sophia specially booked this fireworks show for him." Sophia's husband. I turned to look at the driver, and the driver nodded, "Yeah, I heard he just came back today." Because there was some misunderstanding about Sophia and another man, Sophia spent a fortune to show her loyalty. I heard that each firework in this show costs 10,000 yuan, and Sophia actually booked the whole show. TSK, TSK, TSK. So in Sophia's heart, I was just another man. I lowered my eyes and smiled silently. The driver continued to sigh to himself, "It's a good thing that rich people waste money. We ordinary people can also watch the fireworks." I looked out of the window and thought, yeah, such a grand love affair has made it hard to tell who was the real husband of Sophia. No wonder, compared to picking me up, creating romance for her first love is obviously much more important. "Sir, sir." The driver's voice brought me back to reality. He smiled apologetically at me and said, "You haven't paid yet." "Oh." I took off my wedding ring and put it on the passenger seat, saying, "Keep the change." "Hey, sir, it's too much, sir." The driver kept calling me from behind, but I walked into the community without looking back. Just as I was about to step into the pitch-black villa, suddenly, a huge firework bloomed behind me. I turned around, and more gorgeous sparks gathered into a huge rose, blooming in the air. The drones formed a formation with the words "Love is like youth," without cost. I thought, at this moment, Sophia's first love was probably very happy. The brilliant fireworks illuminated half of the city, but left me in the shadows. I took a few steps forward and walked into the area that the fireworks could illuminate. This was the warmth that my wife created for another man, and I could only briefly borrow a little of its afterglow. I crossed my fingers and, facing the sky full of fireworks, softly wished myself, "James, Merry Christmas." Back in the cold and deserted villa, I nestled on the sofa and called my brother Mark. He quickly answered on the other end, "Are you short of money again? How much do you need?" My heart felt a pang of sadness. Every time Sophia rejected my important financial applications, Mark would pay the money for me. I shook my head and said, "No, I was wondering if your company is still short-staffed." There was no response for a full 5 seconds. Then, Mark asked in disbelief, "Are you coming back? Have you thought it through?" I nodded and said, "Yes." Mark and I started a company together after graduation. When our business was booming, I met Sophia, who came to talk about cooperation with us. She was also the girl I had a crush on since college. Those days were wonderful. Sophia had a poor stomach, and she would only eat a few more mouthfuls of the food I cooked. She had a poor sleep, and she could only fall into a deep sleep in my arms. For Sophia, I promised to give up my job. Mark had advised me more than once that a man shouldn't give up his career, especially when it was a crucial period for the company's development. He described to me again and again the picture of the company's rise in the future and how I would be worth hundreds of millions, but at that time, I just smiled. If it was for Sophia, I was willing to give up everything. I gave all my shares to Mark and took care of Sophia wholeheartedly, but what I got in return was being abandoned in a helpless situation again and again. Of course, we're short-staffed. Mark's voice increased by an octave. Are you serious? You're not just saying this out of anger after a fight with her, are you? I laughed and replied, "I swear to you." Well, I want to set up an overseas branch, and I need a pioneering talent like you. Going abroad with me, bro? That would be great. Then you should learn French quickly. As long as you can communicate with the French normally, I'll be with you. We'll leave next month. After hanging up the phone, I dug out the long, forgotten French learning books. I should have learned it long ago, but then I met Sophia. My French is average, so I have to start working hard now. My body, which had just had surgery, was a bit weak. I made myself a cup of coffee, sat in the study, and delved into the composition sentences. Since my right hand had lost its sensation in the car accident, I could only try again and again with my left hand. Before I knew it, I fell asleep on the desk. In my half-asleep and half-awake state, there seemed to be some noise outside the door. "I'll take you home. James won't be angry with me, will he?" Then came Sophia's slightly drunken voice. "No, he'll just cry and beg me not to leave him." "Hey, Sophia, be careful." A scream came, and the study door was suddenly pushed open, completely waking me up from my drowsiness. Sophia was being held around the waist by David, leaning drunkenly on him. She looked up and saw me sitting at the desk. "You're back." I rubbed my eyes and yawned. David suddenly let go of Sophia and said in a panic, "Sorry, James. Sophia drank too much. There was no car around, so I sent her back." I glanced at David and said indifferently, "Oh, thank you." I didn't ask what Sophia's driver was doing. Instead, I chuckled, stepped forward, and patted him on the shoulder. Then I continued, "Your face is all red from the cold. Thanks for bringing her back." David was stunned, and even Sophia frowned and said, "James, what are you insinuating?" I said expressionlessly, I'm not." David suddenly grabbed my arm and said with a pitiful look, "James, I really didn't mean it. If you want to blame someone, blame me. Please don't quarrel with Sophia because of me." I stuffed a hot water bag into David's hand and said with a smile, "Take it. Be careful not to catch a cold." David's words were interrupted. He silently squeezed the hot water bag, and his eyes looking at me carried a bit of resentment. I walked towards the bedroom on my own and said wearily, "David, if you don't mind, you can sleep in the next room for the night. I'm sleepy, so I won't keep you two company. Good night." Then I entered the bedroom and closed the door. Outside the door, the two of them were frozen in place. I closed my eyes, and not long after, the bedroom door behind me was opened. "James." There were a few soft calls. I was a bit sleepy and didn't want to respond. "James, I know you're not asleep." Sophia's tone was a bit angry. I reluctantly opened my eyes and asked, "What's up?" She hesitated for a while and then said, I sent him away. I raised my head and asked in confusion, oh, you're not letting him sleep here for the night? She frowned and said to James, I grew up with him. I hope you don't be jealous for no reason. I laughed and replied, what jealousy? It's just that it snowed at night, and the road is slippery. I thought it was unsafe for him to drive home. Sophia was stunned. I went back to sleep. A warm body temperature was pressed against my back, and her breath fell on my ear as she said, don't you have anything else to say? I closed my eyes and said, what should I say? Sophia asked unwillingly, aren't you supposed to have a lot to say at this time? I opened my eyes, looked at her, and said calmly, yeah, every time I see you with other men, I must quarrel and ask you to prove yourself. You two grew up together. What's there for me to be jealous about? Sophia's hand on my shoulder tightened. This was the first time that in our confrontations, she was the one left speechless. I was half asleep when a hand touched my abdomen. I was startled and quickly grabbed the hand and said, I don't want to have sex. She hugged me and asked in confusion, but we haven't had sex for a long time. I clenched her hand tightly and said, aren't you really curious why I went to the hospital today? My financial application clearly stated that it was for a surgery, but from beginning to end, you didn't even ask me how I was feeling. She laughed and said, I know. It's just a headache or a fever. Wife will make it up to you now, okay? I shook my head and said, I just don't want to have sex. I wrapped myself tightly in the quilt and continued, I said I'm sleepy. In my relationship with Sophia, it was always me who tolerated all of her, and I was always the one who begged her to do this and that. Refusing to have sex was something that had never happened before. The hand behind me gradually clenched tightly, and the voice said coldly to James, usually it's you who begs me to do this kind of thing, right? Then there's no need to in the future. Sophia didn't say anything more. After a while, the bedroom door was suddenly slammed shut, waking me up just as I was about to fall asleep. I turned around, and there was no sign of her on the bed. After Sophia slammed the bedroom door, she went out the front door. Soon, the sound of a car engine starting came. I didn't chase after her, nor did I send her an apology message as I usually did when I made her angry. Instead, I could finally lie in bed peacefully and have a good sleep. The next day, Sophia didn't come home all day. I didn't check on her whereabouts as I used to. Instead, I met with Mark and discussed the future process. When he learned that I was going to divorce, he jumped up excitedly and said, I knew you would definitely come to your senses. You shouldn't have been a house husband in the first place, having to report to her even for spending 100 yuan. After hearing this, I just smiled to hide the bitterness in my heart. At this time, Sophia called and said, it's getting dark. Where are you? I was stunned and asked, you're home. Usually, after a quarrel, Sophia would leave me at home for at least a week until I completely lost my temper and then come back. I had just walked to the door when brilliant fireworks suddenly bloomed in the night sky. I looked up, and it was the same as what I saw last night. Just as I was engrossed in watching, a Rolls-Royce stopped in front of me. The familiar figure opened the car door and got out. Sophia looked at me with a smile and said, James, do you like it? I asked in confusion, is this for me? She stood beside me, took my arm, and looked at the sky with me, saying, what? Thought I forgot about you. I drank a bit too much last night. Earlier, I sent the driver back for Christmas, so I asked David to drive me back. Don't mind. I was fascinated by the fireworks and said with emotion, it's so beautiful. Sophia called me James. I turned my head and replied, huh. There was a bit of displeasure between her brows, but finally, she sighed and said, I know you're resentful that I booked a fireworks show for him, but he just came back from abroad, and because of your comment before. I smiled lightly and said, how could I resent you? I can also see the fireworks show you gave him. Isn't it nice? Sophia was directly stunned. I looked at her and continued, Sophia, anyway, thank you. This one is even more beautiful than last night's. She observed my expression and asked in confusion, you're not angry? I said indifferently, what should I be angry about? You two grew up together, and one of you just came back from abroad. It's only natural for you to give him something, right? Sophia just stood there, stunned. After a while, there seemed to be a hint of guilt in her always cold eyes. She held my arm tighter and said, let's go on a trip. You've been cooped up at home for long enough. I thought about the fact that I still had to hurry up and learn French, so I shook my head and said no, home is fine. Sophia's hand holding my arm froze, and she said wrong but I've already booked it. I said then go with someone else. Sophia frowned and said to James, it's an intimate trip I chose, a couple, customized one. I lowered my eyes, and the fireworks bloomed in her eyes. If I had heard Sophia say that she was willing to spend so much thought on me a few days earlier, especially a couple, customized intimate trip, I would have happily hugged her. After all, I used to enjoy being her husband so much that I wished everyone knew we were a couple. But now, I just smiled gently and said, "Thank you for your thought, but I really can't go." Sophia looked at me in disbelief. I gently pushed her hand away. "It's too cold outside. Let's go back inside." Then I turned around and opened the door. But when I turned around, Sophia didn't follow me. Instead, she got into the car, slammed the door shut with a loud noise, then started the engine and drove away. Sophia was always like this. When there was a disagreement between us, she would leave me where I was, then block all my contact information, waiting for me to consume my emotions completely. Then she would come back home as if nothing had happened, leaving me with no energy to argue, and I would have to pick up my emotions. But now, I didn't even send a single message. I opened the door and entered the house. Sophia didn't come home for a whole week, and I didn't ask. Every day, I would have tea with Mark, recite words, and practice speaking. I successfully completed the onboarding process and received an advance salary from Mark. The equity transfer will take some time, but it will all be returned to you in the end. Since your marriage, the value of our equity has increased significantly. Mark excitedly told me about the company's development over the years. The more I listened, the sadder I felt. I patted him on the shoulder and said, "You've worked hard all these years." Just as I finished speaking, my Twitter rang with a special attention notification sound. I opened it, and it was David. In the past, I was always very concerned about Sophia and her little first love who was abroad. Every time Sophia went abroad, she would surely go to accompany him. On one hand, I didn't want them to be too close, and on the other hand, I was curious about what happened between them. So, rather awkwardly, I set David as a special attention person. In the post, he was sitting in a helicopter wearing sunglasses, putting his arm around someone's shoulder and taking a happy selfie. The caption read, "Who said first loves can't be close?" Although the person next to him was wearing sunglasses and a mask, I recognized Sophia at a glance. I didn't call to question her why she took David there. I just liked the post and cancelled the special attention setting for David. Just as I put down my phone, Sophia called and said, "I'll be home for dinner tonight." I didn't understand what she meant for a moment and just subconsciously said, "Then I'll save some food for you." Sophia's voice was a bit suppressed as she asked, "James, don't you know what I mean?" I didn't answer, and she hung up the phone. We didn't hire a nanny at home. On one hand, Sophia only liked the food I cooked. Later, she thought that hiring a nanny would make me lazy. When I got home, I cooked a meal for two and then sent Sophia a message, "What time will you be back approximately?" She didn't reply. I didn't foolishly wait until late at night as I used to. Instead, I ate my portion by myself. After waiting for a while and still getting no news from her, I had to wrap her food with plastic wrap and put it in the fridge. I still had to recite words and didn't have time to deal with this. However, it seemed a bit inconvenient to study at home. I'd better go to the library tomorrow so that I don't have to worry about Sophia disturbing me when she gets home. The next day, I went to the library. By the time I felt hungry, it was already dark outside. I suddenly realized that I hadn't thought about Sophia all day. So, I didn't necessarily need her to have my own spiritual world. Just as I was thinking, Sophia called, "You're not at home." "I'm at the library." "What's up?" Sophia paused for a moment before saying, "Let's talk." "I'll come pick you up." Sophia and I did have something to talk about, and I also wanted to find her. When I packed my things and went downstairs, Sophia's car was already parked at the door. I habitually went to open the passenger side door when a sudden exclamation sounded, "Hey, James." David's cuff was entangled with Sophia's hair. Sorry, Sophia's hair got caught when she was picking up her lipstick. Don't misunderstand. There's nothing between us. Even though he said so, his action of casually putting his hand on Sophia's and the provocative glance he gave didn't show any sign of apology. Sophia looked at me, raised her hand, and untangled her hair herself. At the same time, she looked up at me, her cold eyes mixed with a bit of exploration, as if she wanted to catch something on my face. I didn't question Sophia why she brought David and let him sit in the passenger seat, nor did I ask Sophia to explain why her hair was so tightly entangled. I just smiled indifferently and said, "You two grew up together. What would I misunderstand?" Then I opened the door of the back seat and got in. After I put my bag away, I noticed that Sophia was looking at me through the rear-view mirror, her brows furrowed deeply. I didn't know what she was angry about. Was it because I didn't make a scene like before, asking her to prove her innocence? "What's wrong?" I asked. Sophia seemed to have something stuck in her throat. In the end, it turned into a sigh, and she started the engine. Nothing. David looked at her carefully, then glanced at me through the rear-view mirror, his face looking a bit displeased. Let's eat out today, Sophia said as she drove. David immediately nodded. Okay, let's go to the old place. I haven't eaten there for a long time. Sophia said impatiently, I'm asking James. I was listening to spoken language with headphones on. Hearing this, I was stunned to me. Yeah. Sophia looked at me through the rear-view mirror, frowned, and said, let's go to the Western restaurant where we had our first date. What do you think? David's face darkened. I nodded indifferently and said, whatever. Sophia was still looking at me, as if waiting for me to say something more. Seeing that I didn't seem to want to continue, she seemed to sigh softly. Her hand holding the steering wheel became a bit agitated. David's hand gently rested on her forearm, and he said softly, Sophia. Shut up. Sophia snapped in a low voice. I was taken aback. This was the first time she had gotten angry with David, especially since they hadn't seen each other for a long time. David put down his hand, looked up at me in the rear-view mirror angrily, and then suddenly covered his head, looking in pain. Ouch, it hurt so much. I noticed that Sophia's hand paused. What's wrong with you? Did your old problem flare up again? David frowned even more tightly, looking pained. I don't know. It just hurts a lot. Sophia, can you take me to the hospital? Going to the hospital meant going in the opposite direction of the original route. The nearest hospital was more than 10 kilometers away. Sophia looked at me through the rear-view mirror. David groaned in pain. But, Sophia, I can't stand the pain anymore. Sophia clenched the steering wheel and stepped on the brake. James, get out of the car. It was the same old script. Between me and David, I was always the one being abandoned. But this time, I didn't make a scene. Instead, I opened the car door and got out, saying, oh, okay. Sophia was stunned. I turned around and walked back. She rolled down the car window and shouted at me, James. I turned around. She paused and said, I'll be home for dinner tonight. I was stunned for a moment and replied, forget it. I think he needs your care. You two can eat near the hospital. Sophia asked in confusion, are you jealous? No. I answered sincerely. But there seemed to be a hint of disappointment in Sophia's eyes. Maybe I was just seeing things. If you really want to come back, I'll order takeout for you in advance. I said. She paused and then said, I've lifted the restrictions on the finance side. You can spend freely under 5,000 yuan from now on. Oh, thanks, but no need. I said with a light smile and turned to leave. After I got home, Sophia didn't come back and didn't send any news all night. I didn't ask either. I reviewed the French I learned during the day and then went to sleep. It was not until a week later when I passed the French test that Sophia still hadn't sent me a single message. And I seemed to have forgotten about her in the intense preparation for the exam. Until that day, after I finished my re-examination at the hospital, I saw David at the hospital entrance. Sophia wasn't with him. I smiled politely and said, are you about to be discharged, fully recovered? He didn't say anything. He walked up to me and threw a sheet of paper at me. I took a closer look. It was a pregnancy test form. Sophia was 3 months pregnant. But I hadn't had a sexual relationship with Sophia. 3 months ago was exactly the time when Sophia went abroad for a project. David looked at me coldly, raising his chin. The child is mine and hers. I think you know what to do. You should know better than me who Sophia will choose between you and me. I looked at the description on the pregnancy test form that the fetus was stable, and I chuckled. My eyes couldn't help but get a bit sore. Suddenly, he snatched the pregnancy test form back. David put his hand behind his back, and his smile looked a bit guilty. You're back so soon. Sophia turned to look at me and asked. I looked up, my eyes desolate. In Miss Sophia. I usually called her Sophia. Only when I talked about cooperation with her would I call her Ms. Sophia. She frowned and reached out her hand towards David's back. What are you hiding? Ha! David said nervously, and nothing. Let me see. Sophia snatched the pregnancy test form. She looked at the form, then at me, and suddenly laughed. Are you sad because of this? I didn't say anything. For some reason, Sophia's smile seemed to be a bit of relief, and her tone regained its original sense of control. I originally wanted to tell you later, afraid you'd be jealous. I smiled and said, I'm not jealous. I've already consulted a lawyer about the divorce. When you're free, let's get divorced. Sophia was stunned. What did you say? You two talk. I have something else to do. After saying that, I pushed Sophia aside, hailed a car, and left. That night, Sophia came home. There was a table lamp on in the living room. I was dozing off while reading on the sofa. When I heard the door open, I woke up immediately. Sophia stood at the door and said, "I heard you had a car accident. I'll go with you to the hospital again tomorrow." It had been so long since my car accident, and Sophia had just found out. If she still cared about me as her husband at all, she wouldn't have found out about this so late. I replied indifferently, "Thanks, but no need. I have something to do tomorrow. But I'll go with you," she emphasized anxiously. I shook my head and continued, "Still no need." Then I walked towards the bedroom. As I passed by her, she reached out and grabbed my hand tightly. In the 3-year marriage, this was the first time she had held my hand so tightly. She suppressed her anger and tried to speak in a calm tone. "After seeing that pregnancy test form today, don't you really have anything to say?" I didn't know what Sophia wanted to hear or how I should respond. The hand holding mine trembled slightly, and Sophia's voice even had a bit of a tremor. "What about those words you said before?" In the past, if I saw the pregnancy test form, I would probably have been so angry that I would have smashed the house and had a big fight with her. I sighed. "Does it matter what I say, James?" Sensing that I was about to leave, Sophia quickly grabbed me. "The pregnancy test form is fake. I just wanted to make you angry." I silently pushed her hand away, turned around, and took out my medical record from the drawer and handed it to her, "But my hand can't hold a pen anymore. This is real." I put the medical record into Sophia's hand. When she saw the latest page, the medical record fell to the ground. That day I asked for 3,000 yuan for this reason. My voice was very calm, without any resentment, as if I was talking about something long past and irrelevant to me. Later, it was delayed, and my right hand was disabled. Now I'm left-handed. Seeing me holding the phone with my left hand, her breathing was trembling. She knew that my hand became like this because she rejected my application. "So, for all these days, you've been punishing me like this?" She looked at me with red eyes. I shook my head and said, "It's in the past. Don't think too much." A touch of despair appeared in her eyes. "Don't think too much" was the kind of thing she always said to me. But I didn't mean to argue with her through this sentence. It was just from the bottom of my heart. I turned around and closed the bedroom door. It took me a long time to fall asleep. Only after a long time did I hear the sound of footsteps walking away outside. I had a French written test the next day. I closed my eyes and soon fell asleep. The next day, after I finished the exam and got home, Sophia was rarely waiting for me at home. When she saw me, the corners of her eyes were a bit red. "James." Her voice was a bit hoarse. She walked up to me and stuffed a gold card into my hand. "You can spend my money as you like from now on." Looking at the card, I remembered Sophia saying that all her savings were in this card. During the days when Sophia and I had the most intense quarrels because of David, I wasn't even allowed to touch this card. "Thanks, but I don't need it." I put the card back into Sophia's hand. Sophia looked at me, and her hand didn't move to hold the card. It took me a lot of effort to make her hold the card. Sophia looked at me with a wronged expression and said, "James." I took out a stack of financial forms clipped together from my bag and said to her indifferently, "Oh, Sophia, these are the application forms I submitted to you in the 3-year marriage. In 3 years, I applied for $6,721.35 from you. With interest, it's about $7,500. I found a job recently, and I'll pay you back this money." As I said this, I took out another stack of $100 bills. I put the money and the forms on the table, looked at her, and continued, "Sophia, if you're not at ease, you can ask the finance department to come and count." Sophia was stunned for a moment, then she grabbed the stack of forms like crazy and flipped through them quickly page by page. Each page clearly stated the date, amount, purpose, and the stamp from the finance department. She looked through the stack of papers over and over again. Finally, she held them tightly in her hand, almost in despair. Sophia asked in surprise, "In such a long time, you only applied for this much?" "Yeah." In 3 years, the money Sophia spent on me was less than the change of a gift David gave her when he came back. But she was always worried that I was taking advantage of her. Sophia sat on the sofa, looking as if she had aged a lot in an instant. I sat beside her. She lowered her head and said a barely audible sorry. I put the divorce agreement in front of her and said in a flat tone, "It's okay. It's all in the past." Sophia looked up, stunned at the divorce agreement in front of her. I stood up and said, "You can think about it. I'll come to you again in 3 days. Then I walked out. She looked at my back and asked nervously, "James, where are you going?" I thought for a while and still answered, "Oh, I rented a house outside. I'm going to move out today." "But isn't this your home?" Sophia stood up immediately. I looked around, remained silent for a long time, and then said, "It used to be my home." She was stunned. She turned around and looked around, only to find that my things had all been packed up. She grabbed me with red eyes and said, "Why didn't you tell me you were leaving? Who allowed you to leave without even saying goodbye?" I looked at her and explained indifferently, "But I've been packing for 2 weeks. If you had paid a little attention, you wouldn't think I was deliberately hiding it from you." Her hand froze. 2 weeks ago, she was being intimate with David. Her voice trembling slightly, she said, "James, there was never anything between me and him. I just love you so much. Everything I did was to make you unable to leave me. I never thought about separating from you. I just regarded David as my brother. All these days, what I did with him was just to make you jealous." I opened her fingers one by one, turned the doorknob, and said, "Think it over and sign it. Otherwise, we'll have to meet in court." During the 3 days I lived with Mark, Sophia kept sending me messages. From the photos of our first meeting, to the scene of our wedding, to the birthday gifts I gave her. She dug out all the little details of our past, trying to arouse my memories. But in 3 years, there were only a few moments worth remembering. On the contrary, there were countless things that I didn't want to recall. I took screenshots of the chat records of our arguments, when Sophia left me for David again and again, and sent them to her. Soon, there were over 100 records. Sophia didn't reply anymore. 3 days later, Sophia signed the revised agreement and gave it to me. I originally only asked for 30% of the property, because I really lived a life of relying on her for money in these 3 years. But she gave me 70%. Sophia looked at me with dark circles under her eyes, and said, "I restricted your spending just to keep you by my side forever. But I was wrong. Now that you're leaving, what's the use of money to me?" I didn't refuse. I no longer had any feelings for Sophia, and I had no reason to refuse her offer. David called me. He was crying on the phone and said, "James, I won't compete with you for Sophia anymore. Please, could you plead with her for me? She's blocked me now and I can't get in touch with her at all. She also took back all the gifts she gave me. I don't even have a place to live now. She only listens to you. Please, just plead with her for me. I'm standing alone on the street corner right now, not knowing where to go." I sighed and replied, "I can't plead with her for you because I blocked her too." After saying that, I hung up the phone and blocked his number as well. Mark was dragging his suitcase ahead. He turned back and urged, "James, hurry up. The plane is about to take off." I dragged my suitcase and caught up, shouting, "Coming." If you like these stories, remember to subscribe to my channel. Your likes and subscriptions are the biggest motivation for me to update.